Good evening, and welcome to Restored Lore, your home for old, odd, and obscure stories. Tonight's story is Titange by Louis Honoré Fréchette. This story comes from his book Christmas in French Canada, published in 1899. This story is a follow-up to Tom Caribou, the first story in our Nightmare Before Christmas series, which gave a very brief introduction to these characters in the framing story. It might be enjoyable to listen to that story before this one. I will link it on screen, but it is not necessary at all. The narratives are independent and work just as well separately. Now, let's open our imaginations and begin. "That's a rattling fine story," said old Jean Bilodeau. "But haven't you got another one? There's plenty of time yet for midnight mass." "Yes, tell us another story, Uncle Joe," said Phemy Boisvert. "Don't you know any about that Chasse-galerie you were speaking of just now?" "Good," said we all around. "A Christmas story of the Chasse-galerie." Fiddle Joe never had to be asked twice. "Very well," said he. "Crick-crack, boys and girls, parlou, parlez, parlot, etc." And he went on. "This is to tell you, my friends, that on that year I was hired by old Dawson for squaring timber at a lumber shanty he'd opened at the entrance of the Rat River on the St. Maurice, together with a gang of raftsmen from Three Rivers. Although the voyageurs of Three Rivers are a pretty rough lot, as you will see by and by, the winter we spent there was peaceful enough, owing to a very extraordinary accident which happened to one of us on Christmas Eve, and which I am going to relate. As you all know, I reckon, for squaring a piece of timber it requires two men, one to handle the squaring axe and the other to pick and butt, so the boss had mated me with a queer fellow whom his comrades had nicknamed Titange. Titange is a contraction for Petit Ange, which means little angel. A pretty odd name for a shantyman, but I couldn't help it, could I? What was the origin of that name? It appears the fellow had got it through his mother. His father, Johnny Morissette, was as strongly built a man as could be found among the St. Maurice voyageurs in his day, and although of a quiet character, was particularly proud of his muscles. Fancy how cheap the poor man felt when, one fine spring, on returning home after a shanty wintering, his wife handed him a small rickety bit of a tot who looked like a fritter out of the frying pan, saying, "Kiss your son, my friend." "What's this?" exclaimed Johnny Morissette, who nearly choked himself swallowing his quid. "This is the little angel that God has sent us while you were away." "An angel? Bless my soul, dear woman, I'd just as soon take it for a shabby attempt at a scarecrow." But the poor fellow had to take the brat as he was, of course. There was no help for it. And, as he seldom missed the chance for a joke, when he saw one of his chums passing his house, he would shout out, "Hey, won't you come and have a look at my little angel?" And so the boy grew up known by all as Johnny Morissette's little angel, and with time he came to bear no other name but that of Titange. When I talk of his growing up, it would be a mistake to think that he ever turned out to be anything like a patch to his father. Far from it. He was born a weakling and he remained a weakling. In short, as a man, he was a dead failure. This must have been a great worry to him, for, take my word, in the whole of my life, whether in the woods or on the rafts, I never saw such a blazing firebrand. Although he was no bigger than my fist, as a make-up, I suppose, he fussed and fumed and swore and stormed like a whole shanty gang all by himself. At every turn, and mostly for no purpose, he would viciously swing his axe and promise nothing else but to kill, to destroy, to slaughter, to rip you open and tear your heart out. Those who know no better took him for a demon and were scared to death. But I could size him up better than that. And then, as we were mated together, do you see, I had to bear with him, such as he was. The consequence was that, in spite of his rough ways, we remained pretty good friends, and so we had a chat now and again at our work, without wasting time, of course. One morning, it was the day before Christmas, the fellow dropped his axe and started staring at me like someone having a mighty big thing to tell. I stopped also and looked at him. "Uncle Joe," said he, spying around. "What's up, Titange?" said I. "Are you a safe man for a secret?" "Did you ever hear me tattle about?" "No, but I would like to know if I could trust you with something very particular." "Well, that depends." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if there's no mischief intended." "There's no mischief whatsoever. The question is to go and have a little jollification tonight at old Callissa Doucette's of the banlieue." "Which banlieue?" "The banlieue of Three Rivers, to be sure. Old Callissa Doucette is a tip-top fiddler, do you see, and on every Christmas Eve there's always a nice dancing hop with pretty girls at his place." "You mean to go dancing at the banlieue of Three Rivers tonight? More than 200 miles through the woods without roads or teams? Are you mad?" "There is no need of roads or teams." "How is that? Do you imagine you can travel as the crow flies?" "One can travel much easier than the crow flies, Uncle Joe." "Over forests and mountains?" "Over anything at all." "'Pon my word, I don't understand you." "Uncle Joe," said he, glancing once more all around as if to make sure nobody was nearby, "you must have heard of the Chasse-galerie before this, haven't you?" "Well, of course I have." "Well?" "Well, you don't mean to run Chasse-galerie, do you?" "Why not? We are no children." On my conscience and honor, my friends, on hearing that, the shivers ran down my back. I felt as if a hellish warm breath passed right in my face. I tottered on my legs, and my axe shook so in my hands that twice I missed the chalk line, a thing which had not yet happened to me that fall. "But, Titange, my dear fellow," said I, "have you truly no fear of God?" "Fear of God!" exclaimed the ruffian in an outburst of blasphemous laughter. "There is no God around here. Don't you know we have stored him en cache at the Forge village? It's all very well down below, but up by the river, with all cautions taken, as long as you're all right with the devil, everything goes." "Will you hold your tongue, you reprobate?" said I. Now, come, Uncle Joe," said he. "Don't be such a hayseed. Here, listen to me. I'm going to tell you how the thing is worked." And, tropping ahead, he went on quietly to tell me all about the whole infernal concern. A true invention of Satan himself, my friends, no more nor less. My flesh crawls only to think of it. I must warn you, by the way, that if the town of Three Rivers has a great name for its good people, it has a mighty great one, too, for those who are not. And if we are to go by the set of worthless scamps it supplies every year to the lumber shanties, that reputation is not a stolen one, I tell you. I know Sorrel, and I know Bytown, and I can stake my word for it as far as roughs are concerned. There is nothing to beat Three Rivers. If you want to know how far these scoundrels can go, listen. When they start for the shanties in the fall, they are too darn wicked to go to confession, of course, but as they still dread God somewhat, they put him en cache, as they say, which means they lock him up. How do they go through that hellish game? This is what I'm going to explain, at least according to what Titange told me. First, they get a bottle of rum, which has been filled up by midnight on All Souls' Day by the left hand of a fellow standing heels over head. This bottle they hide well in the bottom of the canoe, and they start for the St. Maurice Forges, the first station on their way up. That's where the fine work of the devilish trick is gone through. Remember, the chapel of the village has a flight of wooden doorsteps. Well, when it is pitch dark, one of the scalawags lifts up one of the planks while the other empties the bottle into the hole, saying, "Gloria Patri, Gloria Patro, Gloria Patrum." To which the other replies, replacing the plank as it was, "Let the cat free, let the wind blow, let the boys drum." After which, added Titange, if you are all right with old Harry, you need not fear anything for the whole winter. Beyond the Pont aux Baptêmes, God is nowhere. No saints, no angels, nothing at all. One can work the Chasse-galerie every night if he wishes to. The canoe travels like wind at hundreds of feet above the earth, and as long as you do not utter the name of Christ or of the Virgin, and you take care not to run against the church steeples, you can paddle thousands of miles almost in the twinkling of an eye. Isn't that smart? "And this is what you're after tonight?" said I. "Yes," he replied. "And you want to take me along with you?" "That's it. We are 5 already. If you join us, it will make 6. Just 1 at the bow, another at the helm, and 2 paddlers on each side. I've thought of you, Uncle Joe, because of your brawny arm and of your sharp sight and your spunk. Now, say yes, and we'll have a high old time tonight." "And this is the Holy Christmas Eve, too. Do you think of it?" said I. "Well, this is nothing but fun, and Christmas is a day of rejoicings, you know that." As you may well think, my friends, although Fiddle Joe may not be a Christian of the first water, I couldn't stand such profanity without being startled. But at the same time, I must declare that I had often heard of this invention of Satan called Chasse-galerie. I had even seen it, as I have already said, in broad daylight, right in front of the church of Saint Jean del Chalion, and I shall not deny that I was rather anxious to know how these scamps managed the infernal machine. In fact, my friends, to tell you the whole truth, I had a kind of notion to witness the thing with my own eyes. "Well, what have you to say to this, Uncle Joe?" said Titange. "Are you in it?" "Ma frime, old fellow," said I. "I don't say no. Are you sure there's no danger?" "Not the slightest. I'll go bail for that." "Well, I think I'll chime in." "Well done. I may depend upon you?" "Honest. When shall we start?" "As soon as the boss is asleep, 9:30, the latest." "Where?" "You know where the big drive canoe lies?" "Yes." "That's the one we'll take. Don't fail to be there in time. In less than half an hour we'll be at old Doucette's, and then, hurrah, boys, with the double-double and the gis-sample and the pigeon wings. You'll see, Uncle Joe, how we twist up a midnight mass, we boys of 3 Rivers. And so saying, the rash fellow started a quick step on his piece of timber, clogging his heels as if he had been already hopping at old Calice Doucette's with the girls of the banlieue of 3 Rivers. As for me, my friends, I was far from feeling so merry. In fact, I was more than ill at ease. I was dreadfully scared. But I had my plan, of course. So, I wasn't late on the spot. At 9:30 sharp, and before the others had turned out, I had time to pin a small picture of the infant Jesus right on the stem of the craft. "There," said I to myself. "This is stronger than all of the evil spirits of damnation. We'll see what's going to happen." All aboard, quick!" whispered Titange, falling in with 4 other worthless chaps and taking his place at the stern. "Uncle Joe, you have keen eyes. Sit in front. The others at the paddles. No scapulars on any of you?" "No." "No medals?" "No." "Nothing holy, you understand?" "No." "All right then, you ready? Attention now. Let everyone repeat after me. Satan, our master fair. Satan, our master fair. Heave us up in the air. Heave us up in the air. Wing, wang, wong. Wing, wang, wong. Wong, wang, wing. Wong, wang, wing. Drive us along on the night's dark wing. Drive us along on the night's dark wing. Now, paddle on, boys. Damn it, paddle on. But it was no go, my friends. Vainly did Titange and his comrades paddle as if to save their lives. The canoe didn't stir. How is this? Shouted out Titange with a dreadful oath. You didn't repeat correct after me. Let us begin over again. We began over again, but it was no use. The craft remained motionless in the snow, like a dead trunk. By damnation! Cried Titange with a string of oaths. Some of you are cheating. Step out, one after the other, and we shall see who is the confounded traitor. We stepped out one after the other, as he said, but for no good. The machine did not move an inch. By all the thunders, swore out the little man, I shall go alone, and may all the devils of the St. Maurice hang the whole set of you by the neck. Satan, our master fair. And the reprobate went on with the devilish imprecation. But, far from traveling on the night's dark wing, Titange couldn't jump over a fence, and we didn't even see the wing of a bat. The canoe was frozen dead. Then, my friends, it was a tempest, the sole remembrance of which makes my hair stand on end. My axe! My axe! Where is my axe? Yelled the ranter. I'll kill! I'll murder! I'll massacre! My axe, I tell you! Bad luck, there was one at the bottom of the canoe. He grabbed the tool and, standing up straight on one of the crossings, wild with rage, he swung it 3 or 4 times around his head like a desperate maniac. It was terrible, but at the same time it was a real curiosity, my friends, to see this insignificant little bit of a man who looked like a consumptive mosquito raising such an infernal row. A pack of mad hounds couldn't have been more noisy. The whole shanty flocked out, of course, and witnessed the dreadful scene. Titange had it in for the canoe now. You accursed rascal, he cried. I have said all the words correct. You must start, or I'll know the reason why. And so saying, he darted forth with his axe to demolish the bow of the craft where my little picture stood fast on the stern. Goodness of my soul, we had only time to utter a cry. The axe, catching in a branch, had whirled out of his hand and fallen back right on the outstretched arm of the miscreant whom the shock had hurled headlong to the bottom of the canoe. The sinews of his wrist were clean cut. At 12 o'clock that night, the whole shanty, moved by the terrible ordeal, knelt down for once and fervently offered an honest prayer to the newly born Redeemer. On New Year, an old missionary visited our camp, and we as one man confessed our sins, Titange first of all. Full of repentance, and confused for having so poorly succeeded in putting le bon Dieu en cache, he moreover took advantage of the good priest's company to make his way down to 3 Rivers, without thinking for a moment, I'll stake my words on it, of sparking with the girls of old Calice Douces of the Banlieue. Some 2 years later, happening to stop at the St. Maurice Forges, I saw, on the steps of the chapel, a poor ailing beggar holding out a hand with fingers crooked, distorted, and twisted like a Christmas croquignole. I drew near to give him a penny. It was my former timbermate, old Johnny Morissette's little angel, Titange. And crick, crack, etc. This is a short story, but it's just packed with interesting ideas and fun turns of phrase. The baby looking like a fritter out of the frying pan. I'm glad for a greater explanation of the Chasse-galerie, but I do wish he hadn't sabotaged it. I'd have liked to see it do its thing. And what do we think of the parallels of witches flying on broomsticks while lumberjacks fly in canoes? Although, in a recent story on this channel, on Duffy and the Devil, witches were flying on broomsticks and on wooden stools and on giant leeks, so I guess anything will do. Of course, I think it's absolutely fascinating that the lumberjacks believe in God and yet think that they can put him away for a while and sin unencumbered by his presence. It reminds me of a post I recently read online where a mom says that her little girl asked her if Santa could see her when she's naked, and she said, "Of course not, honey," because she wants her daughter to feel safe and comfortable. But after a couple of days, she realized that what her daughter was actually looking for was a loophole. She was taking off her clothes before doing things she didn't want Santa to know about. Anyway, I think that kind of philosophy of putting God away makes sense in the context, especially for Catholics. Catholicism in particular seems like a heavily ritualized religion, right? People don't really have a direct relationship with God. They don't even directly access scripture. It's all kind of mediated through the priest and the saints and the church and the service and the practice of it. And I can see why you might feel that religion belongs to towns and cities and civilizations, and it doesn't really have a place in the wilderness. The ritual of putting God into the bottle is kind of hilarious. I can just see all these lumberjacks standing on their heads trying to pour rum with their left hands at midnight and falling and cursing and getting up and trying again. How long could you attempt such a thing before it isn't midnight anymore? Or actually, I guess you could practice with water and get really good at it before All Souls Day. At the end of Tom Caribou, I mentioned that Fiddle Joe / Jos Violon was a character invented by Frechette, who tells these fantastic tales by the fire in the winter evenings in Frechette's stories. Frechette wrote a whole book of Fiddle Joe stories, and they are still popular in parts of Canada. But actually, I've done a little bit more research and I am confused. I'm reading a few other things that suggest that Fiddle Joe was a real person and that young Frechette was one of the boys gathered around to listen to his tales at the winter hearthside. In fact, there's a Jos Violon festival in Quebec that celebrates the art of storytelling, and they seem to believe that he was a real person and that Frechette is describing his own actual childhood experiences. For the purposes of just enjoying the stories, I don't think it matters, but I confess that I would like it to be true. I prefer the idea of this old 19th century bard character going around and playing the fiddle and telling stories in Canadian villages. It's a nicer idea than him just being a fictional character who's part of Frechette's framing story. If you listen all the way to the end of the video, you get to hear me make a little confession. This week's confession is that I love the idea of a storytelling festival where people gather around and listen to old folklore and fables. As you can probably tell from this entire channel and all 100 plus videos. And I'm reminded that I used to go to something like that in Portland many years ago. A friend hosted a sort of monthly story night at a local coffee shop where a local actor would tell some kind of story. What ruined it, of course, is actors. I mean, I do like actors and I used to know a lot of them, but after a few months, the story nights kind of turned into a couple of actors performing scenes. Then it was people performing their own original work. And I'm sorry, but your one-person show is a completely different thing than the storytelling I actually came for. I mean, I can see how the two things are on a similar continuum, like these little digressions at the end of my videos, but I keep them at the end specifically because I know some people won't be interested and will want to click away after the story, and I don't blame them at all. Anyway, I had to stop going to the story night, and then I had to kind of avoid my friend who got used to seeing me there. If you like old stories and dislike pretentious performance art, you should subscribe. I seek out weird, old, unusual stories and I share them with you, and you wouldn't want to miss anything. Please also like this video and drop a comment below to help spread the word. And if you really want to help me out, consider using a link in the description to buy me a coffee. Thank you so much for your support, and I will see you in a few days.